Thanks, Darcy. Good morning, everybody. And definitely aloha. So glad everybody could make it out. I wish you would have kept the weather with you for those who traveled in. But if you looked outside right before we came in, there's a lot of there's sunshine, clear skies. Don't think it'll last forever this week, but please, I hope you get a chance to go out and enjoy. You know, the part of the reason that we wanted to bring the Coalition Interoperability Forum and TechNet together was to have a greater participation across the board in both events. So I ask your indulgence and your help and support that please make sure you get out to the industry booths, get out to the, I'm forgetting the word now, get out to where all the industry booths are, and because we have the exhibit hall, right, and get out to the exhibits. We have a jam-packed week. I know that both with this and with the TechNet things, and so we want to make sure that we say thanks to our industry partners, and the way you say thanks is by going out and shaking their hand and seeing the things that they have to offer. I will tell you, I've been on the ground for 31 days in the theater, so I'm probably the least person who is qualified to stand up here and talk about Indo-PACOM. But I will tell you, everybody in here knows the importance of Indo-PACOM. Everybody in here knows the importance of the threats that we face, because if you think about today's environment, two of the biggest threats, both, I'll say one an immediate one with DPRK, and long-term PRC and China, those are both in this theater. And I would offer, we have the pacing threat in this theater. And so it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we're ready, that we continue to compete as we are competing today, but also be ready in case the unfortunate instance occurs where there's actually armed conflict. We understand that there are others in this theater who aren't as friendly as we would like them to be. And they're the ones that I think are the pacing threat. And that's something that we need your help on, both from a coalition standpoint, but also from an industry standpoint of how do we get after that. Admiral Davidson, as you hear him this afternoon, he will talk about how do we regain the advantage, okay, in this theater, and what are the things that we need to do in order to make sure that we are competing on a day-to-day basis, but also that that if we do have to go to war, that we actually are that we have the capabilities of winning. And if you think about the things that need to occur and the things that we are doing today, the information technology and the communications and the partnerships are at the heart of every single thing that he's pushing for, every single thing that we need to understand from a national defense strategy. The things that we are doing as part of TechNet are part and parcel to every single thing that he wants to get done, as well as our nation. I know the National Defense Strategy is a couple years old almost, but I think the department is still getting its feet under it to, okay, so how do we actually get after this strategy? Those who've heard me talk before, I will tell you the National Defense Strategy is one of the most important documents that we've had in decades. And the reason I say that is because every single service and every single combatant command had inputs into this throughout the entire process. It wasn't something that was done at the OSD level and then quickly staffed out. Every single chief, every single combatant commander had their inputs. Their inputs were adjudicated, and so it's everybody's strategy. And that's something that's why in my eyes it's the most important, one of the most important documents that we've had in the last couple decades, is because everybody's invested. And now we have to make sure that we actually invest in what we are invested in. And that's one thing that Admiral Davidson is continually pushing forward. He's had many discussions in the DC arena. For those who know the whole budgeting process, we are in the midst of PBR, which is Program Budget Review, and Indo-PACOM has significant engagements across the board to make sure that his vision to get after the National Defense Strategy is actually that the department invest to make sure that we can push forward not only for potential fight today and in the competition we face, but also longer term. I will tell you, if you look at what are the things that we need to look at and what are the things that we need to address, first and foremost is interoperability, which is why we have this forum. If we cannot communicate, if we cannot talk, if we cannot share data, there's this notion of how do you connect, how do you share, and then how do you learn, which is kind of a maturity level of interoperability in my eyes. It's very important from a joint standpoint, but just as important is coalition. As General Shea talked about, in the European theater, you have NATO alliance. There's a lot of alliances in this theater. It's just not one big one. And so that makes this theater, in my eyes, a little bit harder, because now we have to figure out, so how do we share, how do we connect, how do we share, and how do we learn? I'll tell you one of the big things that we really need help on, I would offer from a partner standpoint, is security, cybersecurity, and information assurance. If your goal is to share information and share as much information as you can, there's a policy aspect of that will continue work, because from a cyber standpoint, I'll offer, and from a space and cyber standpoint, the sharing of information is very difficult from a policy standpoint, and because we like to classify things at a very high level. We will continue working that from a policy standpoint, but in order to share information, you have to have a trust, and you have to have an understanding that those you are sharing with have the right protections, have the right security, and are able to take care of that information so that it's not exploited by those who are unfriendly, who will remain anonymous for this talk so that we can keep going through from a mic standpoint. So how do we make sure that those you're sharing with? So I'd offer that's one of the big things that I think from an industry standpoint, from a coalition standpoint, that we need to tackle and make sure that we address. I'll also offer in everything that we do, at the time and place that we really need to do it, it will be contested. Guaranteed, especially in a conflict. So what kind of PACE plans do we have out there, and what's available from a technology standpoint that if the primary way and means of communicating and connecting, sharing, and learning is not there, how do we take care, what's the alternate? So what is our PACE plans? I'll tell you, a lot of the PACE plans that I've looked at recently, it's not PACE, it's PPPP, because it's all about the primary. And so that's one thing that we're looking at, and from a coalition standpoint is very important, is if that primary is not available or not available at the time and place that we want it to be, then how do we get around that? Again, the overall goal is to make sure it's there. So how do we have a resilient capability, which is very important. But if that's not available, then what do we need to do there? I will tell you from a full spectrum standpoint, how do we share more of what's available from a full spectrum standpoint, and what are some of the policy limitations that one country may have that another country may not have, and how are we able to leverage those together to still provide the effect that we need at the proper time? So that's another area, I think, from a coalition standpoint, that's an opportunity that we can take advantage of. As we talked about earlier, from a Five Eyes standpoint, right? There's a whole bunch of different alliances and partnerships that we have. So how do we bring those together more so that it's not just a bilat here and a bilat there or a trilat, that we actually have a lot more larger alliances, and then how do we take that from an interoperability standpoint? I'll say we talked a little bit about resiliency, we talked a little bit about cybersecurity. I will tell you the sexy stuff continues to be the full spectrum capabilities, but if we don't focus efforts on the DODN piece and DODN operations piece, and making sure that it's available at time, place of our choosing, that it is protected, that it's secured, and then ultimately defended, then operations that we want to do from an all-domain standpoint will not occur at the time and place of our choosing. So as we talk all-domain operations, and I know some people talk about multi-domain, some talk about all-domain, I think at the end of the day, it's a combatant commander scheme of maneuver that is leveraging each and every domain Also, it is a national standpoint of how do we leverage the entire DIME process, because I would offer from an information standpoint that some of those unfriendly organizations and countries that we talked about are doing a very good job from a malign influence standpoint. And so we need to compete just as good, and we need to compete better to make sure that from a malign influence standpoint, because today, the whole goal is how do we maintain the peace we have today that is better supportive of our ideals and the things that we're trying to do from a national standpoint. And we want to prolong this peace as long as possible. Well, in order to do that, there's a competition that's ongoing. And the competition, first and foremost, is from an economic standpoint. It's also from an information standpoint. And so as we look at the DIME, the M is kind of small, but the M has to be able to be enlarged whenever we need it to be. And so your help and support from a coalition standpoint, and how do we make sure that that we have the capabilities when required, but more importantly, that we are competing across those other avenues into the future. I think with that, I'll kind of stop, because I could talk a lot. We can talk more about regaining advantage. We can talk more about the things that we're trying to do. But I'll tell you from a J6 standpoint with Indo-PACOM, the goal is how do we increase partnerships from a coalition standpoint, and how do we make sure that we are more apt and more able to communicate and connect, share, and learn. How do we improve the cybersecurity standpoint and information assurance across the board from a partner standpoint? And that way that takes away any argument that a policy person has of sharing information, is if there's a trust factor and there's a confidence level from a security standpoint. And then how do we make sure from a DOD standpoint that we're able to connect, share, and learn? And then from a full spectrum standpoint, how can we leverage policies, and how can we leverage capabilities from other organizations, other nations, to increase the full capacity of the coalition and not just an individual country. Okay, so with that, any questions for me? Yes, sir.
Real quick question, 5G, how much does that keep you up at night?
So I will tell you, between 5G, AI, and the investment that other countries are making in those technologies plus other is what concerns me. Because it's not a PACOM issue, it's not a military issue, it's a national issue. And I think we as a nation have to make sure that we're investing. And when I say investing, it's not just money, right? It's the intellectual property, it's the people, it's that we're investing. I'll tell you, I think we underestimate what 5G and these technologies are going to bring, and the capabilities. I'll tell you, nothing keeps me up at night, because I have my 14-month-old grandson with us. That's been with us for 30 days. So by the time I'm done with work and the grandson, I sleep like a baby. So. Yes. But if he wasn't here, that concerns me, because and the other part is we're not taking full advantage of it yet. But also the other part, as you talk about from countries that we won't name, and how they are investing in it and trying to set the standard from an international standpoint, that's very concerning. Yes, sir.
Joe Carson. One of the things I had to ask is similar to your point around AI. I just came from, previously I was in town Digital Summit. AI strategies was a major focus on governments and strategies, especially around defense and intelligence. Is there a specific area that is targeting AI strategies within the Pacific? Is it a subject that is becoming more focus point, or is it still further down the road?
So I would tell you, from what I've seen so far, there hasn't been a lot of discussion on AI, but it doesn't mean that it's not happening. But I'll tell you, I think every single mission thread that we have in Indo-PACOM and other places can leverage AI. The key is having the people who understand how the mission works and understands the technology and how to bring those together. Because just throwing out AI and going, AI is going to be the solving of the world hunger of this, it actually will put you behind, in my eyes. And so bringing those together and having, and I'll tell you, the one thing that we need to really push harder on is data analytics and data scientists. I'll tell you from an Air Force standpoint, and Earl Matthews knows this, we kind of, I won't say we went away, but we didn't emphasize it, but now it's starting to come back. Because we realize the power of individuals who understand the data and and the data analytics piece of this. And then if we can bring technology to take care of some of the basic blocking and tackling, then that makes them that much more powerful. Yes, sir.
You mentioned all domain. Do you see any similarities between the all domain push for convergence and leverage as it relates to the other domains, and a similar type of need for coalition partners? I mean, if you get a set of capabilities to converge domains and be able to have more synergy in your efforts, it seems there's something that's there that would make coalition interoperability a necessary and an additive component. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the more we can converge, the better to an extent. Because I think one of the problems with convergence, especially from a technology standpoint, is that makes a potential critical vulnerability that may be easier to tackle. And so as you bring convergence together, you have to make sure you understand the underlying cybersecurity issues and the physical security issues of something that can be easier to hit. I'll say a single aircraft, as an example, is much easier to hit, although it could be hard, than 100 drones, and especially 100 drones that are dispersed. And so how do you leverage the asymmetric style warfare that we're seeing across the board, asymmetric style missions across the board? And so, but I think there's an opportunity there. I'd say there's opportunity within the department as well as the coalition. Is that? Yes, sir.
I'm John Leslie from the Australian Trade and Investment Commission, and I have a question about your use of the term coalition. I spend most of my time working with companies, investors, technologists that work across borders, and a lot of my time is spent trying to overcome or deal with the regulations that prevent coalitions from forming or prevent that coalition from operating together. So what's being done to address all of those issues in this space?
Not enough? Is it?
Specifically?
No, so again, having from this standpoint, having been on the ground 30 days, I don't have a good answer for you on that. What I will say is one of the things that we're looking at is the thing that I call institutional silliness. And it's those policies, those things, those regulations, those instructions that inhibit the ability to increase our partnership, to increase innovation, and to increase mission effectiveness. And so when we find those things, we just have to get after them. The unfortunate thing is a lot of policies have been put in place because of one event or one incident, and we haven't gone back to go, does it really make sense today? And with the things that we're trying to do from building the partnerships. So I don't really have a specific example, but I do know that we are going after it. And so if you have specific examples, we're happy to address them and to get after them. So if you send me that list, and we'll work it.
We talk about all this coalition stuff and things we want to do, but it always seems like money's a problem. Money's always a problem, funding and everything. So from my perspective, when I see a tax fleet, I've only been there for a month. It seems like a lot of the coalition.
So a month or like 31 or 32 days. Come and see if you've been here longer than I have. Oh, okay. Then you're the expert.
I didn't want to trouble. Okay. But, and I'm using that as an excuse if it comes out like a BS question. So, it always seems like funding is a problem. One of the always great things that have technology and stuff. But from our perspective and my minimal perspective, actually, like coalition partners want it really bad, or we want it really bad, and they have the funding for it. So it seems like if we want it and we get to the point where we can't fund it or it's not a priority anymore, yet every other coalition within the tax leader saying, hey, we want it, we need it, we need it.
Yeah.
I know you've been there for 30 days.
So, I'll tell you, if you listen to all of our combatant commanders, I think, and our senior military leaders, I think every single one of them, as they talk with congressional leaders, they say CR is the biggest issue affecting our ability to continue to maintain our readiness and increase our readiness. I saw on the news feeds this morning, General Raymond, who's the U.S. Space Command commander, recently was talking, and he said his big bold letters, we need to get past continuing resolution if you want us to move faster from a U.S. Space Command standpoint. I will tell you, while I'll never say there's enough money, I would offer there is money that can better be utilized within the department, and that's what we have to go after. And show the benefit to the overall mission, the benefit to the overall combatant commander scheme and maneuver. Again, it's not enough, but I think there is some available. We just have to find it. I'll tell you, the other part, I think, is if you look at it from a national standpoint, the concern over the next few years is the economic pressures of other programs within the U.S. that I think is going to continue to put pressure on the Department of Defense, which is the largest discretionary account that we have within the U.S. I think my concern is in a few years from now, the increase that we've had from a monetary standpoint as we built up our readiness over the last few years, that's going to slow to a trickle. And so which is going to make it even more imperative to how do we find out where the institutional silliness is from a policy or from a resourcing standpoint and go after those dollars. I know it's not a great answer because the resourcing is limited, but I think that there's some opportunities there at least to move the ball forward. Yes, ma'am.
Sharon Woods, Program Manager for the Cloud Computing Program Office. When you say that Indo-PACOM is looking to regain the advantage, what advantage in particular are you most focused on looking at?
Trying to think of what I can say.
Yeah, I know.
Yes. I would offer that, and I'll be very vague on this, and I'll apologize, that in a different forum we could probably talk a little bit more. I think regaining the advantage is how do we make sure that things that we are trying to accomplish, missions that we are trying to accomplish, and our national ideals, that we are on solid footing and at an advantage in relation to supporting international law and international norms. Because I think everything, in my eyes, has to be foundational to international law and international norms. Not all countries, no names, subscribe to that. And so how do we put ourselves in advantage against those who subscribe to a different ideal and to different international law or norms? Yes, sir.
Coming in as a startup, Indo-PACOM's done a great job compared to a lot of other parts of government that I had to deal with trying to connect with and find out how to serve mission needs. But one of the continuing things in general with government is, startup speed moves at one pace, and government is positively geological timescales. You guys have done a great job already, but what sort of effort is there to make sure that companies who come in with innovative ideas can get traction timescales that keep them alive long enough to be able to serve the mission?
Right. Part of that I would have to turn to Mr. Cieslak, who's been here for a little while in the theater to talk about any specifics. I'll tell you, at least from an Air Force standpoint, one of the things that they've been doing is things called pitch days, which I think, and it'd be great to have feedback, that those have been welcomed. Probably not enough, but that's one of the big ways that we're trying to get after some of the acquisition delays. Dr. Roper is doing, in my eyes, a fantastic job of trying to streamline those processes, streamline the ability for startups and other companies to be able to do business with the department at a much faster pace.
Can I add to that, to your list of silliness?
Yes.
So Australian companies can only bid on AFWorks bids as a sub to a U.S. company, even though their technology might be good. But that's just another example of silliness.
definition excludes most venture capital-backed companies. So
Okay.
that makes it
Yeah.
adding civics.
Yes, and again, piece on the department's acquisition rules and policies are still not as fast as they need to be. What I'd hope, though, is at least you've seen progress in getting faster. Now we just got more things to do. And so adding that to the list is just something else that we can kind of continue to address. Okay, I think I may have time for one more question before I get the hook. Okay, well, so thanks again for your time. Thanks for coming out from wherever you've traveled from. I'll be around the next few days. I hope to talk to people more to kind of get your thoughts and ideas of things that we can do to better the relationship, both from an industry standpoint, but also from a coalition standpoint, and kind of moving forward and making sure that we address Admiral Davidson's push to support the national defense strategy that our nation needs us to do. So thank you for your time and have a great week.